Mom discovered pregnancy for the fourth time, but I'm done raising her kids. So I moved out, but she came crawling back when the man she trusted abandoned her, and karma left her alone and broken. My tiny apartment in Nashville is quiet. Too quiet sometimes. The silence presses in, a physical weight on my chest. It's a stark contrast to the symphony of chaos I left behind. The constant cries, a chorus of needs and wants, the endless demands, a staccato rhythm of, "Hannah, can you? Hannah, I need. Hannah, he took." The ever-present sticky fingerprints on everything, a ghostly reminder of small hands reaching, grasping, needing. Here, in the sterile quiet of my one bedroom, it's just me and the hum of the fridge, a low, rhythmic lullaby that sometimes makes the silence feel even heavier. I stare out at the city lights, twinkling like fallen stars against the inky canvas of the night, and try to convince myself this is what peace feels like. It's weird. Unsettling almost, like a missing limb I didn't know I was phantom feeling until it was gone. I'm Hannah, by the way. And I guess you could say I grew up, well, not with parents, but as a parent. My mom, Angela, had me young. 16 to be exact. Picture this. A skinny girl with wide, frightened eyes, clutching a newborn baby wrapped in a hospital blanket. That was my mom. And she just kept going. It was like she collected babies the way some people collect stamps, each one a tiny, demanding addition to her ever-growing album of motherhood. There's Liam, he's 12, all gangly limbs and preteen angst, perpetually glued to his video games, oblivious to the world spinning around him. Then there's Chloe, who's 9, a whirlwind of glitter, giggles, and lost hair ties, trailing a cloud of sweet chaos wherever she goes. And finally, little Max, the baby of the family at 5, all wide-eyed innocence and sticky fingers, his small hand constantly reaching for mine. The age gaps are significant, to say the least. 11 years between me and Max. 11 years of stolen childhood, of responsibility thrust upon me before I even knew what it meant. And you know what that means? It means I was changing diapers when I should have been going on dates, fumbling with tiny snaps and the pungent aroma of baby powder while my friends were giggling over boys and first kisses. It means I was making dinner, mac and cheese, chicken nuggets, the culinary repertoire of a 20-something, when I should have been studying for exams, cramming for history tests, while simultaneously refereeing squabbles over the last dinosaur-shaped nugget. It means I was basically raising these tiny humans, wiping noses and bandaging scraped knees, while trying to figure out how to be a human myself, navigating the treacherous terrain of adolescence with the weight of the world on my shoulders. It's always been like this. I barely remember a time when I wasn't responsible for someone. School plays? Forget it. My evenings were reserved for bedtime stories, reading the same worn-out copy of Goodnight Moon until the words blurred before my eyes, and frantic searches for lost pacifiers, crawling under furniture in the dim light, my fingers brushing against dust bunnies and forgotten toys. Friends? Birthday parties? Nope. Someone always had a cough, a fever, a meltdown that required my immediate attention, my presence, my comfort. My teenage years were a blur of spilled juice, sticky floors, scraped knees, tear-stained cheeks, and the overwhelming, cloying scent of baby powder. It just was. This was my normal. This was my life. A life lived in the shadow of motherhood. A life where my own needs and desires were perpetually relegated to the back burner. It's not like I resented them, not really. They were just kids, after all, innocent and oblivious to the burden they placed on me. It's just I never really had a choice. And sometimes, late at night, when the apartment is quiet, save for the hum of the fridge and the distant wail of a siren, and the city lights blur through my tears, I wonder what it would have been like to just be Hannah. Just a girl, not a mom, not a sister mom, just me. A girl with dreams, with aspirations, with a life beyond the four walls of our cramped apartment and the endless cycle of needs and demands. A girl who could go to a party without worrying about who was watching the kids, who could sleep in on a Saturday morning without being woken by the insistent cries of a hungry toddler who could simply be, just be. Remember that time Liam needed braces? I was working double shifts at the diner, slinging hash browns and lukewarm coffee, my feet aching, my smile plastered on, just to scrape together enough for the down payment. Mom? She was finding herself, a euphemism for dating some guy with a questionable motorcycle and even more questionable intentions. Braces weren't exactly on her self-discovery agenda, so there I was, 18 years old, smelling like stale grease in desperation, handing over my hard-earned cash to the orthodontist, while Liam sat there, oblivious, playing some game on his phone. Or the time Chloe needed a new dress for her school play. Cinderella, she was supposed to be. My Cinderella was wearing hand-me-downs, 3 sizes too big, her tiny frame swallowed by faded fabric and frayed seams. Mom, predictably, was MIA. So, I stayed up all night, hunched over my ancient sewing machine, transforming a thrift store find into something resembling a princess gown. My fingers were raw, my eyes were burning, but when I saw Chloe's face light up, a shy smile blooming on her lips, I felt a flicker of something. Pride, maybe? Or maybe just the bone-deep exhaustion that had become my constant companion. It wasn't just the big things, either. It was the constant, relentless drip, drip, drip of small expenses, the insidious erosion of my meager savings. Diapers, formula, school supplies, the endless stream of snacks that disappeared as quickly as they appeared. I was constantly juggling bills, robbing Peter to pay Paul, my bank account perpetually hovering precariously close to zero. And then there was the emotional toll. The constant worry, the gnawing anxiety that settled in my stomach like a lead weight. Were they eating enough? Were they warm enough? Were they happy? Were they safe? These questions echoed in my mind, a constant, low-humming soundtrack to my life. And then there was the resentment, the simmering, bubbling resentment that I tried to suppress, to bury deep beneath layers of responsibility and obligation. The resentment that flared up unexpectedly, a hot, prickly rash spreading across my skin whenever Mom waltzed in with some new boyfriend, all smiles and promises, oblivious to the mess she'd left behind. The latest model was Mark. He had a good job, supposedly, a construction something or other. He drove a shiny pickup truck and wore those tight jeans that showed off. Well, you get the picture. Mom was smitten. He was the one, she declared, her eyes shining with that familiar, naive hope that always preceded the inevitable crash and burn. He helped out with the bills sometimes, took the kids to the park occasionally. He was present, and for a while I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things would be different this time. Maybe I could finally exhale, finally shed the weight I'd been carrying for so long. Maybe I could finally just be Hannah. Spoiler alert, I was wrong. So wrong. Because the thing about building a life on someone else's fleeting affection, on someone else's empty promises, is that it's bound to crumble. And when it does, it takes everything with it. It was a Tuesday, I remember, because Tuesdays were taco night, a sacred ritual in our chaotic little world. I was elbow deep in ground beef, the sizzle and pop a familiar soundtrack to my Tuesday evenings, when she dropped the bomb. Just like that. Casual as you like she was announcing what we were having for dessert, not this. "Oh, by the way, Hannah," she said, her voice light, airy, almost sing-songy. She was perched on a bar stool, freshly manicured fingers drumming a rhythmic tattoo on the countertop, her gaze fixed on her reflection in the microwave door. "I'm pregnant." The spatula slipped from my grasp, clattering against the linoleum floor. The sizzle of the beef suddenly sounded deafening, a violent hiss in the sudden, suffocating silence. I stared at her, my mouth open, my mind a blank canvas, the words echoing in my ears, bouncing around the confines of my skull, refusing to coalesce into anything resembling comprehension. Pregnant. Again. Another one. Another tiny human. Another demanding mouth to feed. Another small life tethered to mine. Another weight added to the already crushing burden I carried. "That's great, Mom," I managed, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. My voice was flat, devoid of any emotion, a hollow echo of the joy I should have felt, the excitement I should have expressed. But there was nothing, just a vast, empty void where those feelings should have been. A hollow ache in my chest that spread outwards, a cold, creeping numbness that slowly enveloped me, inching its way up my throat, constricting my airway, stealing my breath. She finally looked at me then, a flicker of something, annoyance, impatience, in her eyes. "Aren't you happy for me?" she asked, her voice laced with a hint of petulance, the familiar whine that always preceded a demand. Happy? Happy for what? Another sleepless night? Another missed opportunity? Another year shaved off my already dwindling youth? Another tiny human whose needs would eclipse my own? Whose demands would become my commands? Whose very existence would be another link in the chain that bound me to this life, this endless cycle of responsibility and obligation? No, I wasn't happy. Not even a little. But I couldn't say that. Not to her. Not then. So I plastered a smile on my face, a grotesque imitation of genuine happiness, my lips stretched thin, my cheeks aching. "Of course, Mom," I said, my voice a strained whisper. "That's wonderful." And in that moment, something inside me snapped. A silent, imperceptible fracture. A hairline crack in the foundation of my carefully constructed facade. I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that this was it, the final straw, the breaking point. I was done. Done with the diapers. Done with the tantrums. Done with the endless demands. Done with the constant worry. Done with the simmering resentment. Done with the crushing weight of responsibility that had become my life. I was done being Hannah, the sister mom, the surrogate parent, the ever-present caregiver. I was done. And in the quiet hum of the kitchen, amidst the sizzle of the ground beef, and the expectant look in my mother's eyes, I made a silent vow. A vow to myself. A vow to break free. A vow to finally choose me. The packing was a frenzy, a desperate, almost manic scramble to gather the fragments of my life, the few possessions that truly belonged to me, and cram them into the battered suitcase I'd dragged down from the attic. My hands trembled as I folded clothes, my mind racing, a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Fear, exhilaration, guilt, relief, swirling inside me like a storm. I felt like a fugitive, escaping the clutches of a life I hadn't chosen, a life that had been thrust upon me, a life that had slowly, insidiously consumed me. I didn't have much. A few threadbare jeans, a couple of worn-out t-shirts, a sweater my grandma had knitted for me years ago, its soft wool still carrying the faint scent of her lavender perfume. A handful of books, dog-eared and well-loved, each one a portal to a world beyond the confines of our cramped apartment. A small, chipped mug, a gift from Chloe for my 18th birthday, decorated with a lopsided drawing of a stick figure family. These were my treasures, the tangible remnants of a life I'd barely lived, a life I was now leaving behind. I avoided looking at the pictures on the wall, the snapshots of happier times, of birthdays and holidays, of smiling faces that now seemed like ghosts from another lifetime. I couldn't bear to see the innocent eyes of my siblings, the trusting smiles that would surely crumble when they realized I was gone. The thought of their faces, etched with confusion and hurt, was a physical ache in my chest, a sharp, stabbing pain that made it hard to breathe. When Angela finally found me, I was zipping up the suitcase, my hands still shaking, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. She stood in the doorway, her face a mask of disbelief, her eyes wide and uncomprehending. For a moment, there was silence. A heavy, suffocating silence, broken only by the rhythmic tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the hallway, each tick a hammer blow against the fragile shell of our reality. What are you doing?" she finally asked, her voice barely a whisper, laced with a hint of fear. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, the words hanging in the air, heavy and irrevocable. Another silence, longer this time. The air crackled with unspoken accusations, with the weight of years of unspoken resentments, of unmet needs, of broken promises. "Leaving?" she repeated, the word a question, a blad plea, a condemnation. "Where are you going?" "Nashville," I said, my gaze fixed on the suitcase, on the chipped handle that I gripped so tightly my knuckles were white. I couldn't look at her. I couldn't bear to see the hurt in her eyes, the betrayal that I knew would be mirrored there. "Nashville?" she scoffed, her voice rising, the mask of disbelief crumbling, replaced by the familiar anger, the righteous indignation that always shielded her from the consequences of her actions. "You're just gonna leave? Abandon your family? Abandon your siblings?" The word abandon hung in the air, a poisoned dart aimed straight at my heart. It stung. It burned. But I couldn't let it pierce me. I couldn't let it shatter the fragile resolve I'd finally managed to muster. "They're not my responsibility, Angela," I said, the words tasting like acid in my mouth. "They're yours." The anger in her eyes flared, a burning ember threatening to ignite into a full-blown inferno. "How can you say that?" she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "They're your family, your blood." "They're your children," I repeated, my voice rising, the years of suppressed resentment finally bubbling to the surface. "You're the one who chose to have them, not me." The pleas started then. The tears, the accusations, the promises to change, the desperate attempts to guilt me into staying. It was a familiar script, one we'd played out countless times before. But this time, something was different. This time, I wasn't swayed. This time, I didn't falter. This time, I remained resolute. I looked at her then, finally meeting her gaze, my own eyes dry, my voice steady. "I'm sorry, Angela," I said, the words devoid of any emotion, a hollow echo of the apology she deserved, but would never receive. "But I can't do this anymore." And with that, I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I walked out of the apartment, out of the life I had known, and into the unknown. I didn't know where I was going, what I would do, how I would survive. All I knew was that I had to leave. I had to escape. I had to finally choose me. The drive to Nashville was a blur, miles of asphalt stretching out before me, a ribbon of hope unwinding into the horizon. I didn't stop, didn't hesitate, didn't allow myself to second-guess my decision. I drove until the familiar landscape faded into the distance, until the city lights of Nashville shimmered on the horizon, beckoning me forward, promising a new beginning, a fresh start, a life free from the shackles of responsibility and obligation. Finding the apartment was a stroke of luck. Small, cheap, and sparsely furnished, it was a far cry from the chaotic clutter of our old apartment. But it was mine, my own space, my own sanctuary, a place where I could finally breathe, finally relax, finally just be Hannah. The silence was still unsettling. The emptiness still echoed with the ghosts of children's laughter. But it was a different kind of silence. A peaceful silence. A silence filled with possibility. A silence that whispered of freedom. The first few days were eerily quiet. My phone sat on the nightstand, a silent, accusing presence. No calls, no texts, nothing. It was the silence of the tomb, a heavy, suffocating silence that pressed in on me, amplifying the echoes of guilt and doubt that whispered in the back of my mind. Had I made a mistake? Was I being selfish? Should I have stayed? These questions haunted me, swirling around in the empty space of my new apartment, clinging to me like cobwebs. Then the whispers started, little snippets of information, filtered through the grapevine, distorted and amplified by the family rumor mill. My aunt called, her voice dripping with disapproval. "Angela's a mess, Hannah," she said, her tone accusing. "She's struggling. The kids are missing you terribly." Struggling? Missing me? It felt strange, foreign, like hearing about the struggles of a character in a book, a distant narrative that had nothing to do with me. I felt a flicker of guilt, a pang of sympathy, but it was quickly extinguished by the embers of resentment that still smoldered beneath the surface. My cousin Sarah messaged me on Facebook. "Seriously, Hannah?" she wrote. "You just up and left? That's cold. Cold." The words stung a sharp slap across the face. Was I cold? Selfish? Heartless? The doubts gnawed at me, feeding on the silence from Angela, on the whispers of disapproval from my family. Then came the strained conversations with my siblings. Liam called, his voice hesitant, choked with unshed tears. "Why did you leave, Hannah?" he asked, the question a raw, open wound. I didn't know what to say. How could I explain the years of unspoken resentment, the crushing weight of responsibility, the desperate need to finally choose myself? How could I explain it to a 12-year-old boy who just missed his sister? I needed some time, Liam. I stammered, the words inadequate, hollow, a flimsy shield against the torrent of his pain. He didn't say anything, just a choked sob, followed by the click of the disconnected line. The silence that followed was deafening, filled with the echoes of his unanswered question, the unspoken accusation hanging in the air. Chloe sent me a drawing. A picture of our family, stick figures holding hands, with a gaping hole where I should have been. Underneath, in childish scrawl, she'd written, "Come home, Hannah, we miss you." The drawing was clutched in my hand, the crayon lines blurring through my tears. The guilt was a physical weight in my chest, a crushing pressure that made it hard to breathe. Was I a monster? Had I abandoned them? Had I traded my own freedom for their happiness? The silence from Angela continued. Days turned into weeks, the unanswered calls and texts piling up like unread messages in my inbox. It was a strange kind of torture, the silence. More painful somehow than any accusation, any recrimination. It was the silence of rejection, of abandonment, of indifference. And it made me question everything. My decision, my motives, my sanity. Was I wrong to leave? Was I wrong to choose myself? Was I wrong to finally break free from the chains that had bound me for so long? The questions echoed in the empty space of my new apartment, amplified by the silence, by the whispers, by the gnawing guilt that threatened to consume me. The nights in Nashville are quiet. Too quiet. The city lights outside my window blur into a hazy, indifferent glow, and the hum of the fridge, once a comforting lullaby, now sounds like a mocking reminder of the silence I've created. The silence of an empty apartment, an empty life. A life free from the constant demands, the sticky fingers, the endless needs, but also empty of the laughter, the hugs, the messy, chaotic love that had, until recently, defined my entire existence. I lie awake, staring at the ceiling, the shadows dancing in the dim light, morphing into familiar shapes. Liam's lanky frame hunched over his video games, Chloe's bright, mischievous smile, Max's chubby little hand reaching for mine. The echoes of their laughter, their cries, their whispered secrets fill the silence, a phantom chorus haunting my newfound solitude. I hear Chloe's giggle, high and sweet, as she chases bubbles in the park. I hear Liam's frustrated groan as he struggles with his math homework. I hear Max's soft snores, the gentle rhythm of his breath, a comforting counterpoint to the chaotic symphony of our former life. The guilt gnaws at me, a constant, insidious presence, burrowing its way into the deepest recesses of my heart. I clutch Chloe's drawing, the crumpled paper a tangible reminder of the family I've fractured, the siblings I've seemingly abandoned. Had I done the right thing? Was walking away truly the answer? Or was it a selfish act, a desperate attempt to escape the responsibilities I should have embraced? I try to tell myself that I deserve this quiet, this solitude, this freedom. I deserve to have a life of my own, a life beyond the endless cycle of diapers and tantrums and scraped knees. I deserve to pursue my own dreams, my own aspirations, the things I'd buried so deep beneath layers of responsibility and obligation that I'd almost forgotten they existed. But the whispers of doubt persist, insidious and relentless, chipping away at my resolve. Maybe I should have stayed. Maybe I should have found a way to make it work, to balance my own needs with the needs of my siblings. Maybe I should have swallowed my resentment, gritted my teeth, and carried on, as I'd always done. Maybe I'm just a coward, running away from the hard parts, the messy parts, the parts that truly matter. I close my eyes, trying to conjure up the image of Angela, the woman who brought me into this world, the woman who'd also burdened me with the responsibility of raising her other children. But the image is blurry, distorted, like a photograph left out in the sun too long. I see flashes of her, the tired lines around her eyes, the forced smile that never quite reached them, the way she'd bite her lip when she was worried, the way her hand would instinctively reach for mine when she was scared. But these fragments are overshadowed by the resentment, the anger, the years of unspoken frustration that have built up like a wall between us. I wonder what she's doing right now. Is she struggling, as my aunt claimed? Are the kids okay? Is she blaming me for everything, as I suspect? Or has she perhaps finally realized the weight of her own choices, the burden she'd placed on my shoulders for so long? The thought sends a shiver down my spine. A strange mix of fear and something else. Satisfaction? Is it wrong to feel a flicker of satisfaction at the thought of her finally experiencing the consequences of her actions, the weight of the world she'd so carelessly placed on mine? I roll over, pulling the covers tight around me, seeking solace in the physical warmth, a shield against the chill of doubt that seeps into my bones. The silence presses in, heavy and suffocating, filled with the ghosts of what I've left behind, the specter of what might have been. And in the quiet darkness of my Nashville apartment, I'm left with the gnawing, unsettling question: was I wrong to leave? Was I wrong to choose myself? The knock startled me. It was a hesitant, almost timid rapping, a stark contrast to the usual boisterous pounding of delivery drivers or overly enthusiastic neighbors. I wasn't expecting anyone. Visitors were a rare occurrence in my self-imposed exile. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the cage of my anxiety. Who could it be? A bill collector? A concerned landlord? The nagging voice of guilt whispered a single terrifying word: Angela. I peered through the peephole, my breath catching in my throat. It was her, Angela, standing on my doorstep, looking smaller somehow. Defeated. The carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes, the lines etched deeper into her face, the telltale signs of sleepless nights and relentless worry. Her usually vibrant blonde hair was dull, lifeless, hanging limply around her shoulders. She was clutching a tattered purse, her knuckles white against the worn leather. She looked broken. Hesitantly, I opened the door. The words hung in the air, unspoken, heavy with the weight of everything that had passed between us, the years of unspoken resentments, the accumulated burden of shared history. Hannah, she whispered, her voice hoarse, barely audible above the hum of the city outside. She looked at me, her eyes red-rimmed, pleading. Can I come in? I stepped aside, the gesture automatic, a reflex ingrained from years of being the responsible one, the one who always took care of everyone, even the one who should have been taking care of me. She shuffled in, her movements slow, hesitant, like a wounded animal seeking shelter. The silence in the apartment was thick, suffocating. I gestured towards the couch, and she sank onto it, her body slumping, as if the weight of the world had suddenly descended upon her. She sat there for a moment, her gaze fixed on the worn rug, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Finally she spoke, her voice low, trembling. Mark, he left. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. I knew, without her having to say it, what that meant. No more shiny pickup truck. No more occasional help with the bills. No more fleeting illusion of stability. Just Angela, alone, with 4 children and a mountain of debt. Karma, it seemed, had finally come calling. The story unfolded slowly, haltingly, punctuated by choked sobs and long, uncomfortable silences. He'd cleaned out their joint account, she explained, her voice cracking. Taken everything. Left her with nothing but a pile of unpaid bills and a looming eviction notice. He'd met someone else, she confessed, her eyes brimming with tears. Someone younger, she added, her voice barely a whisper, laced with a bitter irony that I couldn't help but acknowledge. The familiar sting of resentment flared, a hot, prickly rash spreading across my skin. He'd done to her what she'd done to countless others, used her, discarded her, leaving her to pick up the pieces. And now, here she was, on my doorstep, looking to me for salvation. She looked up at me then, her eyes pleading, mirroring the same desperate need I'd seen in her so many times before, the same need I'd always, dutifully, fulfilled. "I don't know what to do, Hannah," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I have nowhere to go. The kids, they need you." The words hit me like a physical blow, a punch to the gut that stole my breath. The kids. Liam, Chloe, Max, and the new one. The one I'd tried so hard to forget. The one whose existence had been the catalyst for my escape. They needed me. But did I need them? Did I need to shoulder this burden again? To sacrifice my own hard-won freedom for the sake of a family that had never truly prioritized my needs, my dreams, my very existence? The silence stretched on, thick with unspoken questions, with the weight of years of unspoken resentments, of unmet needs, of broken promises. The city lights outside my window blurred into a hazy, indifferent glow, and the hum of the fridge, once a comforting lullaby, now sounded like a mocking reminder of the silence I'd created. The silence of an empty apartment, a life free from the constant demands, the sticky fingers, the endless needs, but also empty of the laughter, the hugs, the messy, chaotic love that had, until recently, defined my entire existence. And so, I turn to you, internet strangers, the anonymous jury of the online world. I need an outside perspective. I need to know, AITA? Am I the asshole for not taking her in? Was I wrong to walk away and let karma take its course? Did I make the right decision, prioritizing my own well-being, finally choosing myself after years of being everyone else's safety net? Tell me, Reddit, because I honestly don't know anymore.